Imagine waking up one day and realizing you've never truly belonged to yourself. Not your thoughts, not your time, not even your sense of worth. You glance at your phone. A notification pings, your mood shifts. One comment from a stranger spins your day sideways. One glance at someone else's curated perfection, and suddenly your own life, full of nuance and chaos and hidden beauty, feels like a failure. Your mind, like a city under siege, no longer responds to your command. You are reactive, defensive, drained. Everything touches you. Every glance, every judgment, every silence. And worst of all, you can't remember a time when it didn't. But what if it didn't have to be this way? What if there existed a version of you, untouchable, unshaken, and unseduced by the chaos? Not numb, not arrogant, but inwardly anchored. Could such a thing even be possible? Or is it a fantasy, the stuff of warrior monks and cold-blooded narcissists? What does it mean to become untouchable in a world built to pierce your soul with 1,000 invisible needles? We've been taught that strength is about dominance, that power is about control, that invincibility means never feeling pain, but those ideals collapse under pressure. Dominate others and you become addicted to their submission. Seek control and life will constantly remind you how little you have. Try to numb the pain and you lose access to joy as well. You were never meant to live as armor. But you were never meant to be a sponge either, absorbing everyone's energy, everyone's expectations, everyone's projections, until your identity dissolves into a mess of borrowed opinions and performative smiles. Here's the paradox. To be untouchable is not to resist life's storms, but to become the kind of presence that the storm avoids. What makes someone truly untouchable? Think. That person you met once, maybe briefly, who seemed impossibly calm, terrifyingly focused, immune to praise or ridicule alike. Someone who, even in silence, felt louder than the rest. Not because they demanded attention, but because they needed none. Were they born that way, or did they build it? Why is it that some people seem to walk through fire without flinching, while others crumble from a whisper? What if the real difference isn't in what happens to them, but what cannot happen within them? Here's a darker thought. Maybe the world depends on your weakness. Maybe the system thrives on your volatility, because if you're always seeking validation, you're always consuming, always obeying, always afraid. Maybe your vulnerability to external chaos isn't a bug, it's a feature, engineered, reinforced, profitable. Because an untouchable human is hard to control. They don't buy what they don't need. They don't chase approval. They don't flinch when you withdraw your affection. And so, they become dangerous. And you've been made docile, reactive, hyper-aware of others, but estranged from yourself. You call it being empathetic, sensitive, open, but deep down, you know the truth. You're constantly adjusting, bending, reshaping yourself like liquid to fit into everyone else's expectations. You mistake approval for love. You confuse people-pleasing with kindness. And somewhere along the way, you began to believe that to be worthy of peace, you must first be liked, understood, safe. But what if that belief is the very prison? What if everything you were taught about strength and survival was a well-dressed lie? What if becoming untouchable begins with a decision, not to escape the world, but to stop letting it define you? And if that's true, what would that decision cost? Would it mean walking away from roles you've been playing your entire life? Would it mean disappointing people who expect you to stay small, agreeable, apologetic? Would it mean being alone for a while? Here's the bitter truth. Becoming untouchable doesn't mean you rise above suffering. It means you stop outsourcing your center of gravity. You stop giving people power to write your story in ink. You begin to live from a deeper place, one that doesn't tremble when someone else raises their voice or goes silent or questions your worth. But how? That's the haunting question. How does one become untouchable in a world designed to keep you fragile? How do you navigate a society built on comparison, craving, and conformity without losing your soul in the process? Where does it begin? Maybe not with answers. Maybe it begins with a slow, ruthless honesty, a peeling back, a refusal, not of others, but of everything inside you that was taught to be less than what you are. Maybe, to become untouchable, you must first descend, not ascend, into the truth of your own psychological architecture, face what lives there, understand it, unbind it. Because the storm isn't outside of you. It's in the places where you've never felt safe. And until you face it, you will always belong to something else. So let's go there. Let's find what keeps you fragile. Let's name it. Let's tear it open. Because only then can you become untouchable. You were not born fragile, you learned it. Not all at once, but slowly, through 1,000 moments when your authenticity cost you something. A glance that said too much, a silence that said not enough, a punishment for your anger, a reward for your compliance. And over time you began to fracture, not visibly, not dramatically, but imperceptibly. You adapted. You shaped yourself into something more palatable, more predictable. You began to fear the full expression of who you were. You began to crave safety, not as shelter, but as strategy. This is the hidden problem. Most people are not living their lives, they are performing safety. And safety, as it is sold today, is not freedom, it is surveillance. You police your words, you audit your thoughts, you delete your edges before anyone else can criticize them. You shrink in advance, apologize before speaking, smile when you mean silence. Because the deepest wound isn't rejection, it's the fear that if you were truly seen, you would be rejected for real. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Why? Because the real you doesn't always play nice. It doesn't fit the brand. It doesn't seek approval. It wants truth, even when truth costs comfort. And so, your culture taught you to mistrust it, to exile your wildness, to replace instinct with performance. Here lies the paradox. You believe you are being kind, humble, thoughtful, but beneath that is often fear, fear of rejection, fear of confrontation, fear of losing your place in the social hierarchy. You've confused adaptability with authenticity. You've mistaken agreeableness for peace. This isn't just a personal flaw, it's a psychological condition, one reinforced by evolutionary history and modern society alike. From an evolutionary standpoint, your brain is wired for survival through belonging. Early humans survived in tribes. To be excluded meant death. So your nervous system still interprets social disapproval as an existential threat. Your heart rate spikes when someone criticizes you. Your stomach twists when someone ghosts you. Your mind replays a moment of embarrassment like a broken prayer. But in today's world, that wiring is hijacked. You live not in a tribe of 30, but in a virtual coliseum of thousands. Every post is a performance, every silence a signal, every opinion a battlefield. The sheer scale of observation triggers your primal fear of exile again and again. And so you adapt, you contort, you dilute. You become touchable, not because you are weak, but because you are misaligned. Jean-Paul Sartre once declared, "Hell is other people." Misunderstood, this quote sounds cynical, but he wasn't condemning people. He was revealing the anguish of being constantly perceived, constantly mirrored, constantly defined by eyes that are not your own. That is hell, to live your life inside someone else's gaze. To become untouchable, then, is not to reject people, but to reclaim yourself from their gaze. And that is where the real work begins. Because before you can free yourself from others, you must face what in you remains enslaved. You must confront the inner judge, the one who mimics your father's disappointment, your mother's anxiety, your culture's impossible standards. The voice that tells you you must earn your worth through performance. The voice that makes you flinch before you've even been struck. This voice is not yours, but it lives in you. Nietzsche called it the internalization of instinct, a tragic byproduct of civilization. He believed that man, once wild and unashamed, became sick with conscience when he was forced to obey external structures. His power turned inward, fermenting as guilt, shame, and self-judgment. In other words, your suffering is not random, it's structural. The problem isn't just emotional, it's existential. You've been taught to fear the very parts of yourself that make you whole. your anger, your intensity, your strangeness, your unedited truth. Why? Because these are the parts that can't be controlled. And a society built on control cannot tolerate untamed humans. So instead of guiding you to maturity, the system rewards you for suppression. Be calm, they say, when they mean be quiet. Be nice, they say, when they mean be obedient. Be strong, they say, when they mean don't feel. And you, craving belonging, listen. You amputate pieces of yourself for the illusion of peace. But suppressed truth doesn't die. It festers. It comes out sideways. In self-doubt, in resentment, in chronic indecision. You say yes when you mean no. You smile when you want to scream. You make yourself small, then hate others for not noticing how big you really are. This is the unseen war beneath your fatigue. Not laziness, not weakness, but fragmentation. And here's the cruel twist. You cannot become untouchable by building better armor. You become untouchable by becoming whole. That means going to war, not with the world, but with every internalized lie you've mistaken for love. It means unlearning the habits of self-erasure. It means facing the terrifying possibility that you have never been the problem. You've only been deeply misunderstood. Your problem is not that you feel too much. Your problem is that you've never felt safe enough to feel fully. Your rage is not dysfunction. It's intelligence, trapped in a system that only rewards silence. Your sadness is not weakness, it's depth, waiting to be seen, not medicated. Your desire to disappear, a final, desperate attempt to escape a life you were never meant to live. Arthur Schopenhauer once described the human condition as an endless pendulum swinging between suffering and boredom. But perhaps the real prison is swinging between hiding and performing, never landing in the quiet center of authenticity. That center is where untouchability begins. Not in pride, not in perfection, but in integration. To become untouchable is to no longer fear your truth, even when it's messy, even when it's loud, even when it doesn't earn you applause. Because when you are fully with yourself, the world loses its power to touch you in the wrong places. But we're not there yet. Before you can claim that kind of freedom, you must see just how far the lie has gone. Because the damage is deeper than you think. And its consequences are everywhere. It starts small. You say yes to something you don't want to do. You don't speak up when someone crosses a line. You let a comment slide, even though it echoes in your skull for days. And in each moment you tell yourself, it's not a big deal, but it is. Because with every small betrayal of self, you are teaching your nervous system that your truth is dangerous, that silence is safer than confrontation, that peace must be purchased with pieces of yourself. And over time, you forget the sound of your own voice. This is how touchability begins, not through violence, but through erosion. The world doesn't destroy you with catastrophe, it destroys you with fatigue. With the slow grind of daily performance, with a pause that feels hollow and criticism that cuts too deep, with a life built around who you're supposed to be instead of who you actually are. And you think you're just burnt out. But burnout isn't always about doing too much. Sometimes it's about living too far from your truth for too long. That distance between who you are and who you pretend to be creates friction, and friction creates fire. This is not just metaphor. Neuroscience has caught up to what the mystics already knew. Your brain is wired for coherence. When your actions don't match your inner reality, your body feels it. Cortisol spikes, sleep suffers, immune systems weaken, depression creeps in. Why? Because your mind is screaming one truth while your mouth says another. Because every time you abandon your instincts, for the sake of social comfort, your body registers it as danger. You live in a state of constant micro-conflict, not with the world, but with yourself. And that conflict metastasizes into chronic anxiety, into emotional numbness, into relationships where you never say what you mean until it's too late. And here's the real tragedy: no one will stop you. In fact, the world will reward you for it. They'll call you polite, humble, easygoing. You'll be promoted, praised, even loved, for how well you've learned to disappear. And still, you'll lie awake at night, wondering why it all feels so hollow. Because somewhere deep inside, you'll know. You have mastered survival, but you have not lived. Viktor Frankl once said, "When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure." And isn't that what we do? Scroll, numb, swipe, sharp, reach for a little more dopamine, hoping it will cover the existential wound we refuse to name. You call it boredom, but it's not boredom. It's the ache of a self uncared for. It's the body asking you over and over, "Is this all we are?" You see it everywhere. People terrified of silence because in silence the truth might speak. People building entire identities around what they oppose because they've never been taught how to stand for anything. People in relationships that feel like prisons, but staying because freedom would mean being fully seen. This is the unseen consequence of living touchably. You become so used to adapting to others that you forget how to belong to yourself. You become so expert at decoding other people's emotions, moods, and triggers that your own become illegible. You become so good at making yourself digestible that you lose the taste for your own intensity. And here's where it gets even darker. You begin to resent the very people you've tried to please. Because somewhere, subconsciously, you expect them to see your sacrifices, to repay your contortions, to give back what you've given up, and how you can break them. But they don't. Because how could they? You never showed them what it cost you. You never showed them who you really are. So instead, you grow bitter. Quietly, secretly, the resentment builds like smoke behind your eyes, until one day you explode or disappear. And still, you blame yourself. You call it a failure of willpower, a personal flaw. But it's not that. It's the logical outcome of a system that rewards touchability and punishes authenticity. Because untouchable people are unpredictable. They don't follow the script. They say no. They change. They walk away. And that terrifies a world addicted to control. So society has learned to shame untouchability. They call it arrogance, selfishness, narcissism. But don't be fooled. What they're really afraid of is sovereignty. So here you are, trapped in a life that almost fits, a job that almost fulfills you, a partner who almost sees you, a self you can almost live with, and you wonder why you feel exhausted. It's because almost is a slow death. And until you confront the unseen consequences of your touchability, you will keep searching for peace in places that require you to abandon yourself to get it. But you can't abandon yourself into wholeness. You can't fake your way into freedom. The only way out is through the guilt, through the grief, through the realization that most of what you've called love was conditional, that most of what you've called loyalty was fear, that most of what you've called success was just socially acceptable self-harm. This is the dark forest, and this is where most people turn back. Because to go further means to shed identities, relationships, narratives, even entire lives. It means giving up comfort for clarity. But on the other side of that is something rare, something holy, something untouchable. Not perfect, not painless, but whole, real. And it begins, as all transformations do, with a simple, devastating recognition. The cost of staying touchable is everything. Rebellion does not begin with fists. It begins with refusal. The moment you decide, quietly, violently, that you will no longer negotiate your existence for comfort, you have already begun to break free. But don't romanticize this rebellion. It is not glamorous. It is not easy. It does not come with applause or immediate reward. Rebellion begins in silence, when you stop explaining yourself to people who never truly listened. Rebellion begins in discomfort, when you say no for the first time and your voice shakes and your body trembles, but you say it anyway. Rebellion begins in grief, when you realize how much of your life was spent keeping peace that never included your needs. To become untouchable is to betray the version of yourself that survived by vanishing. And betrayal always feels like death at first. The first step is brutal. You must stop seeking permission to be who you already are. That means no longer outsourcing your identity to parents, partners, institutions, ideologies. That means recognizing that you don't need to be understood to be real. That means allowing people to misinterpret your strength as cruelty, your boundaries as ego, your silence as arrogance. Let them. You cannot build an untouchable life while managing everyone's perception of you. Untouchability is built on alignment, not approval. It is forged in solitude, not isolation but solitude, the kind that burns away the noise of the world until only your own voice remains. It is in that fire that the real work begins. And make no mistake, it is work. To rebuild your inner authority, you must confront the psychological architecture of your own compliance. Every time you say yes when you mean no, pause and ask, who taught me this was safer? Every time you swallow your truth to preserve peace, ask, whose peace is this really serving? Every time you dilute your intensity, your intelligence, your anger, your weirdness, ask, why am I still afraid of my own depth? This is not about becoming aggressive. It's about becoming responsible for your own energy, your own integrity, your own freedom. As Carl Jung put it, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This rebellion is how you take back the wheel. But it's not just psychological, it's somatic. Your nervous system is still wired for a world that punished your truth, so you must rewire it. This means learning to sit in discomfort without collapsing. This means staying in your body when you speak your boundaries. This means breathing through the panic of being misunderstood and choosing not to explain yourself anyway. Practice is the only path. One of the greatest myths ever sold is that change must be gentle. But sometimes gentleness is just cowardice in disguise. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to cut fast and clean. Cut ties with roles that suffocate you. Cut habits that diminish you. Cut narratives that paint you as broken, too much, not enough. Let yourself be raw. Let yourself be wild. Let yourself feel the withdrawal from false safety. Because that's all it ever was, false. You were never actually safe, you were just silent. But silence does not protect you, it only delays the consequences. Rebellion is accepting those consequences in exchange for real peace. Not the peace of approval, the peace of alignment. There is a story about the ancient Spartans. When boys came of age, they were whipped in public to test their endurance, to show they could bear pain without shame. We don't do this anymore. Now we endure in silence. We endure lives we don't love, jobs that drain us, relationships that numb us. We wear our wounds like medals, calling it maturity. But what if maturity isn't endurance? What if maturity is revolt? What if the true adult is not the one who adapts best, but the one who finally says, no more? No more sacrificing my truth for your comfort. No more twisting myself to fit systems I did not consent to. No more begging to be seen, loved, understood. The untouchable don't beg. We build. Not walls, but boundaries. Not armor, but standards. Not masks, but mirrors, reflecting back the truth of who they are without apology. This kind of rebellion doesn't need to scream. It just needs to stop lying. And still, it won't be easy. You will lose people. You will lose roles, routines, identities that once gave you meaning. But don't mistake that loss for failure. It is shedding. It is death before resurrection. It is ego falling away to reveal essence. Remember Nietzsche's words, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Your why is this: to be free, not just safe. To be whole, not just palatable. To be untouchable, not because you fear the world, but because you are finally anchored in yourself. The rebellion begins with a single question. If I were not afraid of being misunderstood, who would I become? Now answer it. Not in theory, not in a journal, but in your life. Today, speak one truth you've been holding back. End one thing that is no longer alive in you. Begin one ritual that brings you back to your body, your fire, your center. Because the untouchable are not born. They are forged in fire, in truth, in refusal. And they do not ask the world for permission to exist. They become the kind of person the world has no choice but to respect. And how you can break them. Or both. What if the entire time you were never meant to be understood? What if the deepest peace was not found in being accepted, but in being real, even if no one applauds you for it? The final, most untouchable version of you is not the loudest, not the strongest, not the most praised, or even the most successful. It is the version of you that no longer needs to be any of those things. Because the final form of freedom isn't dominance. It's indifference to anything that tries to reduce your infinite complexity to something digestible. Imagine this. You walk into a room. You feel the atmosphere shift. Some people feel drawn to you. Others feel threatened. You feel nothing. Not because you don't care, but because you are no longer hooked by how others respond to your presence. You know what you carry. You know what it cost. You know who you are. And that knowing, rooted in silence, not noise, is the final shield. Not because it makes you invincible, but because it makes you intimate with your own humanity. No praise can inflate you. No criticism can reduce you. No rejection can unravel you. This is untouchability. It's not that the world stops trying to touch you. It's that their touch no longer defines you. Their labels slide off like water on stone. Their projections no longer stick. Their disapproval becomes irrelevant background noise. Why? Because you've seen the truth. That most people are not reacting to you. They are reacting to their unlived life reflected in your freedom. They are not offended by your boundaries. They are offended by the fact that you dared to have them. They are not upset that you said no. They are upset that you had the power to say it and they didn't. You were never the problem. You were the mirror. Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Hell is other people." But that was only half true. Hell is not other people. Hell is the version of you that only exists in the eyes of other people. That fractured self, that hollow smile, that skin-wrapped performance. To become untouchable is not to kill that self. It's to bury it. With love, with grief, with fire. And in its place, something strange and beautiful rises. Not a new identity, but a return to what you were before the world told you who to be. This is the ultimate truth. You were never meant to be anything other than exactly what you are. Not because you are perfect, but because you are the only one who can carry your essence into this world. You are not here to be palatable. You are not here to be understood. You are not here to make others comfortable. You are here to burn, brilliantly, defiantly, unrepentantly, to live a life so whole that it offends the shallow, to be so deeply rooted in your truth that no storm, internal or external, can uproot you. You are here to be complete, not compliant, and completion requires courage. This is not a journey that ends. You will lose yourself again. You will forget, collapse, reach for the old masks. But now, you'll know. You'll taste the falseness as soon as it hits your tongue. You'll feel the friction in your bones. And slowly, beautifully, you'll return. Not to who you used to be, but to who you were before you had to become anything at all. And in that return, you will no longer be touchable. Not because you've built walls, but because you've disarmed your shame. You've stopped hiding your scars, stopped shrinking your joy. He stopped apologizing for taking up space. You've learned the final lesson. The world cannot touch what it cannot shame. So now, here you stand, burned down, rebuilt, reckless in your honesty, untouchable. You will still feel fear, still feel doubt, still crave the soft lie of comfort, but you'll choose differently. Not because you're trying to prove something, but because your soul no longer fits inside the performance. And there, in that space beyond fear and approval, you will taste something few ever do. 2. Peace. Not the kind that depends on silence, but the kind that sings even in chaos. Not the kind that is earned, but the kind that has been waiting for you. Beneath every lie, every mask, every version of yourself you've ever had to outgrow, you don't need to become anything else. You just need to return to the fire, in the truth, to yourself. Let the world watch. Let them misunderstand. Let them talk. You have work to do, lives to change, a soul to liberate, and none of it requires their permission. You are no longer reachable by the hands that tried to mold you. You are no longer pierced by the opinions of strangers. You are no longer willing to beg for love, peace, or permission. You are no longer afraid of being seen. You are no longer touchable. And now you are free,